They say some doors are best left unopened, some stories untold. This is not one of them. Forget gentle introductions and comforting narratives. Tonight, we dive headfirst into the abyss. What I'm about to describe is not for the faint of heart. It is a glimpse into the shadowed corners of a world where life was cheap and death a performance. A world where the human body became a canvas for the gods themselves. Prepare yourselves. What follows is the anatomy of terror, the Viking blood eagle. For generations, scholars dismissed it as a lurid fabrication, a nightmare spun from the threads of medieval imagination, a gruesome tale meant to frighten, a myth, nothing more. Sagas, after all, were known for their embellishments. Their heroes larger than life, their villains monstrous beyond measure. The Blood Eagle surely belonged in that category, a fantastical horror designed to thrill and terrify, not to reflect reality. But the earth whispers secrets that books often miss. The bones remember what the pen forgets. Recent discoveries, unsettling in their implications, have forced a re-evaluation. Scattered amongst the burial mounds and ancient battlefields of Scandinavia, something has begun to emerge, a spectral echo of that whispered horror. Skeletons bearing the unmistakable marks of ritualistic butchery, ribs severed with chilling precision, a body arranged in a pose that defies natural decay, a pose that mimics, in its grotesque artistry, the wings of a carrion bird. The evidence is circumstantial, fragmented, and fiercely debated, yet it refuses to be ignored. The Blood Eagle may have been more than a story. It may have been a truth, brutal and terrible, that stains the pages of history with crimson. So, what was it, this dreaded spectacle? More than simple execution? It was a ceremonial dismemberment, a performance of agony intended to transform the condemned into a sacrifice worthy of Odin himself. A betrayal, a transgression so profound that it demanded a punishment beyond the veil of death. Imagine it. The victim, bound face down, fully aware, the cold northern air biting at their exposed skin. The weight of expectation, the silence of the gathered crowd pressing in, suffocating. Their crime? Perhaps treason against their lord, a violation of sacred oaths, an act of unspeakable cowardice that stained the honor of their clan. Their fate? A transformation into a grotesque mockery of life, a feast for the ravens of the battlefield, a living testament to the price of betrayal. The air crackles with anticipation. The executioner steps forward. This was no mere butcher. This was an artisan of death, a master of anatomy and symbolism, his every move deliberate, imbued with religious significance. He carried a blade honed to a razor's edge, or perhaps a specialized axe forged for this singular purpose, to bisect the flesh, to sever the connection between bone and life. The first incision, a long, deliberate cut down the spine, separating skin and muscle, exposing the intricate architecture of the rib cage. The pain must have been unbearable, a searing inferno that threatened to consume consciousness itself. But the ritual demanded stoicism, a silent endurance that could, paradoxically, redeem the condemned, transforming their agony into a final act of Viking virtue. Accounts speak of victims who met their fate with unwavering resolve, their faces masks of grim acceptance. Others, undoubtedly, screamed, begged for mercy that would never come. But whether stoic or broken, the process continued, relentless and unforgiving. The ribs, one by one, were meticulously severed from the spine, each cut a violation, a desecration of the human form. But this was not random butchery. It was a precise dismantling, a deconstruction of the body, each imbued with symbolic weight.
Once freed, the ribs were then forced outward, bent back upon themselves, like the wings of a great bird struggling to take flight. The image, already horrific, was now taking shape. The torso transformed into a grotesque parody of an eagle, a carrion bird feeding on the living flesh. The executioner, his face impassive, continued his grim work, preparing the final offering for the gods. The lungs, still pulsating with life, were carefully extracted from the chest cavity and draped over the splayed ribs, resembling the feathered wings of the VIII monstrosity. Some accounts suggest that salt was then rubbed into the wounds, not as an act of mercy, but to intensify the agony, to ensure that the condemned felt every moment of their transformation. And then the final act. The body, now fully transformed into the blood eagle, was left on display, a gruesome monument to the consequences of betrayal. The corpse, arranged with meticulous care, served as a warning, a terrifying symbol that resonated through the generations. The ravens, Odin's messengers, would feast on the remains, carrying the soul of the condemned to the halls of Valhalla, not as a warrior, but as a sacrifice, a testament to the brutal justice of the Viking Age. The stench of blood and death mingled with the salty air, a constant reminder of the price of transgression. It was not merely death, it was annihilation, a complete erasure of identity. This was the blood eagle, not a myth, perhaps, but a glimpse into the heart of darkness. Now, steel your nerves, we descend deeper. The cold reality is, the primary sources are difficult. The sagas, epic poems, and prose narratives that paint our most vivid pictures of the Viking Age are hardly impartial historical documents. Written centuries after the events they describe, often by Christian authors with their own agendas, they are a heady brew of fact and fiction, heroism and hyperbole. They offer tantalizing glimpses into the past, but demand a critical eye, a willingness to sift through the layers of embellishment and myth to find the kernel of truth buried within. The earliest and most frequently cited accounts of the Blood Eagle appear in texts like the Orkneyinga saga and the saga of Ragnar Lothbrok. These are not dry chronicles, they are vibrant, bloodthirsty tales of kings and warriors, love and betrayal, gods and monsters. The language is evocative, the imagery striking, but the question remains, how much of it is real? Take, for example, the saga of Ragnar Lothbrok, one of the most legendary figures in Viking history. The story goes that Ragnar, a fearsome warrior and cunning strategist, was captured by King Ella of Northumbria and thrown into a pit of venomous snakes. As he writhed in agony, he is said to have prophesied that his sons would avenge his death in a manner that would make the very earth tremble. And so they did. According to the saga, when Ragnar's sons, led by the formidable Ivar the Boneless, conquered York in 867 AD, they captured Ella and subjected him to the Blood Eagle. The account is graphic, almost gleefully so. Ivar, despite his physical disabilities, is portrayed as the master executioner, meticulously carving the eagle into Ella's back, while the condemned king screams in agony. The image is powerful, unforgettable, and, frankly, deeply disturbing. It paints a picture of Viking vengeance that is both terrifying and strangely satisfying, a perfect example of poetic justice. But is it true? Contemporary Anglo-Saxon chronicles confirm that King Ella was indeed killed by Viking forces in 867 AD. The Chronicle of the Kings of England mentions that he was slain with exquisite tortures, while other sources refer to his death as terrible beyond description. But none of these accounts mention the Blood Eagle specifically. They offer only vague allusions to the brutality of Ella's demise, leaving room for interpretation.
Were the Christian chroniclers reluctant to describe such a gruesome pagan ritual in detail? Did they simply not know the specifics of Ella's execution? Or was the Blood Eagle a later embellishment, added to the story to amplify the horror and underscore the barbarity of the Vikings? The answers remain elusive, lost in the fog of history. The Orkneyinga saga provides another, equally detailed account of the Blood Eagle, this time involving the execution of Halfdan Longlegs, son of the powerful Norwegian king Harald Fairhair. Halfdan, it seems, had killed Ragnvald, Earl of Mura, during a raid on the Orkney Islands. In retaliation, Ragnvald's son, Einar, captured Halfdan and subjected him to the Blood Eagle, declaring that his enemy would feed the eagles and the ravens. This account is particularly significant because it involves the son of one of the most powerful rulers in Scandinavia. The execution of Halfdan was not just an act of personal vengeance, it was a political statement, a challenge to royal authority. Einar, by performing the Blood Eagle on the king's son, was effectively declaring his independence, asserting his right to mete out justice even to those of royal blood. Again, the details are vivid, almost cinematic in their intensity. Einar is portrayed as a man of grim determination, refusing to delegate the execution to his subordinates, wanting to ensure his vengeance was carried out personally. The message is clear. Even kings are not above Viking justice. Even the most powerful rulers cannot escape the consequences of their actions. The saga of the Sons of Magnus offers a third major account, describing the execution of several Danish nobles who had betrayed their oaths of loyalty to King Magnus the Good after his victory at the Battle of Lierskov Heath in 1043. According to the saga, these nobles were subjected to the Blood Eagle as an example to others, a warning against treachery and disloyalty. This account is particularly interesting because it describes a mass execution, with each victim carved in view of the others, waiting their turn to meet their gruesome fate. The scale of the event is staggering, almost unbelievable, suggesting a level of brutality that is difficult to comprehend. But it also underscores the importance of loyalty and honor in Viking society. The betrayal of one's lord was not simply a personal transgression, it was a crime against the entire community, and it demanded a punishment that was swift and merciless. These saga accounts, despite their differences, share several common elements. They all emphasize the victim's initial defiance, gradually giving way to terror as the execution unfolds. They all depict the executioner as a figure of methodical precision, his every move imbued with symbolic significance. And they all highlight the ritual's purpose, to transform traitors into offerings for Odin, to restore cosmic order in the face of betrayal. But, again, the question of historical accuracy looms large. Were these accounts based on real events, or were they simply literary devices, used to embellish the sagas and amplify their dramatic impact? Were the saga writers accurately reflecting Viking beliefs and practices, or were they simply projecting their own fears and fantasies onto the past? The debate continues. The truth remains shrouded in mystery. The sagas offer tantalizing clues, but they are not definitive proof. To truly understand the Blood Eagle, we must look beyond the written word. We must turn to the archaeological record, to the bones themselves, and see what secrets they can reveal. If the sagas are a tapestry woven from threads of fact and fiction, then archaeology is the painstaking work of separating the strands, of examining the individual fibers to determine their origin and authenticity. It is a slow, meticulous process, fraught with challenges and uncertainties. But it is also the closest we can get to touching the past, to hearing the whispers of those who came before us. The archaeological evidence for the Blood Eagle is, to put it mildly, controversial. There are no definitive Blood Eagle skeletons, no skeletal remains that can be equivocally identified as victims of this gruesome ritual. The evidence is circumstantial, fragmented, and open to interpretation. But it is also intriguing, suggesting of practices that align at least in part with the descriptions found in the sagas.
The most compelling evidence comes from sites where archaeologists have uncovered skeletal remains bearing unusual trauma patterns. Patterns that are consistent with the described execution method. Cuts on the ribs, for example, that appear to have been made with deliberate precision. Vertebrae that show signs of post-mortem manipulation. Bodies arranged in poses that defy natural decomposition. These are not the marks of battlefield injuries, nor are they the result of accidental damage. They are deliberate acts, suggesting of ritual violence. One of the most significant discoveries was made at the Repton mass grave in Derbyshire, England. Here, archaeologists uncovered the remains of a Viking army that had wintered in Repton in 873 to 874 AD. Among the hundreds of skeletons, several showed signs of post-mortem manipulation of the rib cage, with ribs severed from the spine and spread outward in ways that did not match typical burial practices. The archaeologists who led the Repton excavations, Dr. Martin Biddle and Dr. Bertha Kulby Biddle, were cautious in their interpretation of the findings. They acknowledged that the evidence was not conclusive, that alternative explanations for the trauma patterns could not be ruled out. However, they also noted that some individuals appear to have suffered deliberate mutilation after death, possibly as part of a ritual execution or sacrifice. Their findings sparked intense debate among historians and archaeologists. Some argued that the Repton skeletons provided the first concrete evidence of the blood eagle, that they confirmed the historical reality of this gruesome ritual. Others remained skeptical, pointing out that the trauma patterns could have been caused by other factors, such as battlefield injuries or post-mortem damage. Similar discoveries have been made at other Viking burial sites across Scandinavia and the British Islands. At the Trelleborg Fortress in Denmark, for example, archaeologists uncovered skeletons with unusual rib fractures and evidence of careful post-mortem arrangement. The positioning of these remains suggested deliberate staging rather than natural decomposition or casual burial. Carbon dating confirmed that these individuals died during the height of the Viking Age, the period when blood eagle executions would theoretically have taken place. But, again, the archaeological record presents challenges. Many supposed examples of the blood eagle could be explained by other factors: battlefield trauma, burial rituals, or post-mortem damage from environmental factors. The absence of clear, unambiguous evidence has led some historians to maintain that the blood eagle was primarily a literary device rather than an actual practice. The key to interpreting the archaeological evidence lies in forensic analysis. To determine whether a skeleton is a victim of the blood eagle, forensic archaeologists must distinguish between injuries inflicted on living victims and damage that occurred after death. True blood eagle execution would leave specific patterns of cut marks on ribs and vertebrae, along with evidence that the victim survived at least part of the procedure. Such forensic evidence is difficult to preserve and even more difficult to interpret definitively. Bone is a resilient material, but it is also susceptible to damage from environmental factors.
Over time, the edges of cut marks can become blurred, making it difficult to determine the precise angle and direction of the cut. Soil conditions can also affect the preservation of bone. Acidic soils can dissolve bone tissue, while alkaline soils can cause it to harden and become brittle. The debate among historians reflects broader questions about the reliability of medieval sources and the relationship between literary and historical truth. Were the saga writers accurately reflecting Viking beliefs and practices, or were they simply projecting their own fears and fantasies onto the past? Did the blood eagle exist as a real-world practice, or was it simply a literary device used to embellish the sagas and enhance their dramatic impact? Recent advances in forensic archaeology have provided new tools for analyzing ancient trauma patterns. Computer modeling can reconstruct the sequence of injuries and determine whether they match the described blood eagle procedure. DNA analysis can sometimes reveal family relationships between victims, potentially confirming saga accounts of revenge killings within specific dynasties. These new technologies offer hope for resolving the debate over the blood eagle's historicity, but they also highlight the complexity of the task. To truly understand the blood eagle, we must combine the evidence from the sagas with the evidence from the archaeological record, using each to inform and illuminate the other. Even if we never find definitive proof that the blood eagle was practiced, the archaeological evidence can still tell us a great deal about Viking beliefs and practices. The skeletal remains from Viking burial sites reveal a culture that was deeply concerned with ritual and symbolism, a culture that believed in the power of violence to transform and transcend the boundaries of life and death. The blood eagle may be a myth, but it is a myth that resonates with the realities of the Viking Age, a myth that speaks to the brutality and the beauty of a world where life was cheap and honor was everything. Now we face into the darkness. Whether a verifiable historical fact or a potent cultural symbol, the blood eagle casts a long shadow across our understanding of the Viking world. It speaks to a complex interplay of power, religion, and psychological warfare that shaped Norse society and influenced its interactions with the wider world. It wasn't simply about killing, it was about control, physical, spiritual, and emotional. The blood eagle served as the ultimate deterrent. Imagine being a Viking, knowing that the consequence of betrayal, of cowardice, of violating the sacred bonds of kinship could be this. Not just death, but a complete and utter defilement of your body, a permanent erasure of your identity. It would serve as a powerful motivation to remain loyal, to uphold your oaths, to defend your community, no matter the cost. For the potential traitor, for the disloyal vassal, the dread of the blood eagle would have been a constant presence, a chilling reminder of the price of transgression. The threat alone was a weapon, a tool for maintaining order and discouraging dissent. For the loyal community, the stories of the blood eagle served to reinforce their own sense of virtue. By contrast, their faithfulness, their courage, their adherence to the Viking code of honor seemed all the more admirable. The horrifying fate of the oathbreakers served as a dark mirror, reflecting back their own righteousness. The blood eagle, in this sense, was a powerful instrument of social cohesion. Moreover, the ritual had significant religious functions. In Norse paganism, the line between the earthly and the divine was often blurred. The gods were not distant, ethereal beings. They were active participants in human affairs, demanding sacrifices and bestowing favor upon those who honored them. The blood eagle, by transforming human victims into representations of Odin's sacred birds, served as an offering to the gods. It was a way of appeasing their wrath, of ensuring their continued support. It was a means of integrating earthly justice with divine will. Medieval Christian chroniclers viewed the blood eagle with a mixture of horror and fascination. They used descriptions of the ritual to emphasize the savage nature of pagan Vikings and to highlight the civilizing influence of Christianity. Their accounts, while biased, are valuable because they reveal how the practice functioned as a cultural boundary marker, distinguishing Norse society from its Christian neighbors. They served as a stark warning against religious conversion, an illustration of the barbaric consequences of abandoning the true faith. Over time, the blood eagle transitioned from a potential historical practice to a potent literary symbol. Saga writers incorporated accounts of the ritual into their narratives, embellishing the details for dramatic effect. The result was a blurring of the lines between history and literature, a transformation of the blood eagle into a cultural meme, a symbol of Viking brutality that resonated throughout the ages. Renaissance and early modern European writers rediscovered the blood eagle through medieval sources. They presented it as evidence of pre-Christian barbarity, stripping away much of its religious and legal context, and reducing it to mere sadistic cruelty. This decontextualized version of the blood eagle became part of popular stereotypes about Viking brutality, stereotypes that persist to this day. The blood eagle's influence on popular culture is immense. It appears in countless novels, films, and television shows dealing with Viking themes, often portrayed with graphic detail and a sensationalistic flair.
These modern depictions often ignore the ritual's original cultural functions, contributing to simplified and often inaccurate views of Viking society. In essence, the modern cultural landscape has seized on the most sensational aspects of the ritual, divorced it from its context, and used it to perpetuate a caricature of Viking society. Academic historians continue to debate the Blood Eagle's historicality. Opinions are divided between those who see it as a genuine historical practice and those who view it as primarily literary fiction.